Hello everyone, it's Sippy Cup. I've got a cool mod to show you today. This is the Gunrunners plus Tri-Tachyon Station mod for Starfarer Alpha 0.5a. So what does it do? First of all, it adds a new faction. The new faction is called the Gunrunners, not surprisingly. Gunrunners use some ships which are based on both Hegemony and Tri-Tachyon tech, however they've made some modifications. In most cases, their ships tend to specialize in ballistic weapons, even on hulls that formerly used mostly energy weapons. So to give you an example of one of their new ships, they have a cruiser-class carrier, the Hades class, and it looks similar to the destroyer-class Condor. You can see it's got kind of an extra spar here. One of the new ones also is the Gorgon-class destroyer, which is a ballistic-based platform that has the same hull type as the Medusa class, which uses mostly energy weapons. So now that we've covered that, let's go ahead and just jump into the campaign. So the next big thing that changed was the addition of a couple new stations. So one of the stations is a Tri-Tachyon faction station. If you recall, if you played the main vanilla game, I guess you would say, there's only one station. It's for the Hegemony faction. It gets resupplied fairly infrequently, and there's only so much stuff that you can get there. So there are now two new stations. Let's take a look at the map real quick. The Tri-Tachyon station is at the Corvus 4 planet here, and it won't actually get set up until about a week into your new game. When you install this mod, you've got to create a new game. It doesn't retroactively affect your old save game, so kind of a bummer. What are you going to do? I edited my campaign file, gave myself a little bit of money so I wouldn't have to monkey around too much with a crappy frigate. So I gave myself some fighters and attack frigate, things like that. Not too overpowering, working on small unit tactics and things like that. Let's quickly take a look at where the other station is. The Gunrunners faction has a station over here at Corvus 5. So Corvus, this station, they sell a lot of weapons, as you might guess from their name. They sell virtually every weapon module in the game, even ones that you don't normally find on ships, like the large energy weapon, which is the plasma cannon. So let's go ahead and fly over there and I'll kind of show you their inventory. They also have a neat item, which I will also show you in just a moment. And here we are at the Gunrunners Orbital Depot. So let's take a look at what you can get. First of all, I'll go here. As I mentioned, there's a ton of guns. Lots and lots of guns, as you might expect from a faction called the Gunrunners. You can even get some guns that you couldn't get in the vanilla game. So the Storm Needler, for instance, as far as I'm aware, you could only add to your ships via editing some of the campaign files. Messed around with it, it's not really that great. On the other hand, you got the Plasma Cannon, which you couldn't get normally in the campaign, as far as I'm aware, and is awesome. This is a really insane large energy weapon. Mjolnir cannon, things like that. So there's also some new items which are pretty cool here. These can be used to affect your standing, basically, with the different factions. So if you, for instance, engage a Hegemony fleet and you end up hurting your standing with them, in other words, they become hostile to you and attack you on sight, you can come over here to the Gunrunner station, you can buy one of these, and then within a few days, I believe, it will reset your faction status back to neutral. So on the topic of faction standings, I would strongly urge you, unless you're looking for a challenge, not to get on bad standings with the Gunrunners. Reason being, they are very strong with their new ship types, especially early in the game. Now keep in mind that these ships were custom designed by the mod author for one, so he put some pretty good thought into them. But as I mentioned, a characteristic of the Gunrunners is that they like to favor explosive and kinetic weapons. So kinetic weapons specifically are very strong against shields, and since at this point in the game you are likely going to be relying mostly on shields and maneuverability for survivability, you are going to very likely be overwhelmed by some of the Gunrunner fleets. Even the smaller little detachments are going to be very effective at breaking down your shields, and since you're mostly going to have fighters and frigates and things like that, you are not going to be able to tank them with your armor. So with that said, I'll go fly over to the Tri-Tachyon station so you can see what's there. But first, actually, before we do that, let's take a look at the ships that you can buy here. So I believe that these might be new, specific to this mod. I know that I haven't seen them before, as far as I'm aware. I've only seen the other ones. I think they're called daggers, and they use the different torpedo racks with the one-shot red torpedoes. So there's some fighters in here, quite a few fighters, actually. Ah, yeah, here they are. The Dagger torpedo bomber wings. They use the Reaper class torpedo, and these other ones use the Atropos class torpedo. So for frigates, the Gunrunners faction has their very own frigate. This is based on the Hyperion hull, and this is a fire support frigate which features some point defense lasers, light needlers, and most notably the Pylum LRM launchers, which are normally large missile weapons, I believe. So kind of unique to have those on a frigate. Destroyer-wise, you've got the different varieties of the Gorgon class destroyer that I was mentioning before, is related to the Medusa class destroyer that is a Tri-Tachyon energy weapon platform, typically, but the Gunrunners have converted to a ballistic platform. I haven't had a chance to fight or use one of these yet, but they look like they would be pretty effective. And you've got your Pariah class light support carrier, and then cruisers. There's this carrier that I was mentioning before, and there's a couple different flavors. You've got assault and fire support. Fire support meaning typically longer range weapons, and assault typically being shorter range weapons. Specifically, those heavy maulers and antimatter blasters are going to be short range weapons where you're going to get in close and slug it out. No capital ships to speak of yet. So let me pause for a moment and fly over to the Tri-Tachyon station, and I'll show you what's there. And here we are at the lovely Tri-Tachyon orbital headquarters. Let's take a look at their trade and personnel tab here. They've got a lot of weapons. They typically are going to be energy weapons, in keeping with the theme of the Tri-Tachyon faction, which is high-tech energy-based weapons. One of the other things that the mod did is most stations now tend to stock more veteran and elite crew, so that's nice if you've got money to throw around. Now let's see. There are some ships that you can get here that you may not have been able to get before. They do stock more fighters in general at these stations than they did in the vanilla version. Frigate-wise, you've got your Hyperions, Tempest. The Omen class frigate popped up every now and again, but now it is usually in this station. It's primarily a point defense platform. A bunch of different varieties of the Wolf class frigate. For destroyers, you've got a variety of different Medusa class destroyers here, as well as the Sunder class close support destroyer. Cruisers, there's only an Apogee and an Aurora in here now, but they, let's see, for capital, we've got a couple of these Odyssey class balanced battle cruisers that I love so much, and a couple Paragons. I believe that the mod author has added in Conquest class battle cruiser as a purchasable capital ship in these stations, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So I wouldn't dare deprive you of any lasers and explosions in this episode, so let me go find a fight and we'll go try to get blown up. While I'm flying around, I thought I'd mention one of the reasons I installed this mod, which this mod actually doesn't fix, but I'll talk about anyway, is that currently in 0.5a, the way that fleet speed is handled tends to cause your fleets to move pretty slowly, and this was getting me into a rut where basically, because my fleet had grown to a pretty large size, I was presented with kind of two outcomes whenever there was another enemy fleet that I was chasing down. Either I would have a fleet that was smaller than mine that I simply couldn't catch, or I would have a fleet that was bigger than mine, which didn't really present much of a challenge anyway, because my tactics and technique had evolved to the point that they just didn't present much of a challenge. So I wanted to kind of spice things up, and this mod has done a pretty good job so far. I like some of the changes, specifically being able to repair your faction if that is something that you wanted to do. So now I'm trying to hunt down some pirates, and I will resume when I get in a fight. Alright, so I've caught up with an independent mercenary force. They've got a cruiser, a destroyer, tanker, assault frigate, etc. So I've mostly got smallish ship classes here. I've got 2 frigates, however, both with elite crews, 2 wings of Thunder fighters, again with elite crews, a Trident torpedo bomber wing, a light carrier, and then a couple of wings of drones. So I'm going to go ahead and move in to engage, commit my forces to an all-out attack, and then take personal command. So unfortunately I don't have enough points here to deploy everything at once, so I will simply deploy my 2 frigates, my carrier. Whenever you're fielding any fighters or drones, you want to make sure that your initial deployment wave has your carrier in it. If you don't, and your fighter wing gets down to 1 craft, it has nowhere to go repair up, and there's a very good chance that it will just continually throw itself at enemy ships until it's completely wiped out. Now keep in mind that if you have 1 fighter left, even 1 fighter left in a wing, regardless of its size, even in a drone wing of 6, it can fly back to the carrier and then repair to full strength, so you can get back up to the maximum wing size. So that's very important, right? That means that fighters potentially represent a very significant value when it comes to bang for your buck, because they're kind of a renewable resource. And if you don't have a carrier in play, you kind of throw that aspect out. So I'm going to deploy with that. I'm going to take these and these. I don't need the torpedo bombers yet, so I'm going to grab the Wasps, and I will bring in the Trident torpedo bomber wing later. So I'm going to deploy. I'm going to first set an order to assault the middle, which is typically the most important point, and then I'm also going to set a capture order on this side point. And we'll get going here. So my flagship is this Wolf assault frigate. I've got a heavy blaster, salamander, MRMs, and then point defense lasers. I'm going to set the point defense lasers auto fire, since I don't want to have to manage that manually. Only LRMs seem to auto fire, so whether or not I set that to auto fire doesn't really matter, because they won't. And then my heavy blaster, I'll usually just aim and fire myself. So it looks like we've taken the sensor array down here, so now I can call in my torpedo bombers if I was so inclined. I'm going to set my carrier group rally point here, slightly forward of the front line. So now it will hang out there, and if I have any fighter wings, bomber wings, wasps, whatever for that matter, they can come back and rearm and repair at that carrier, and the carrier hopefully won't be in harm's way. Now this, I don't have any cruisers, right, so I'm pretty outmatched here, and it looks like they deployed with most of their fleet to begin with. I believe that is because they chose to defend, right? That whether you're attacking, defending, or escaping has an effect on what your sort of objective is, as well as how many deployment points you get, fleet points in the beginning. So here I am trying to defend this middle point. I'm going to take a look and see what represents the biggest threat. They have an assault frigate here. They've got another assault frigate. The tanker doesn't really have much in the way of weapons, if anything. Maybe just some simple point defense, so I'm not going to worry about that. The hammerhead is going to be hard to deal with, and then back here we've got that Eagle class assault cruiser, and this is going to be a real beast. So let's start by taking care of the most imminent threats here, these Wolf class frigates, and I'll set an intercept order on them, and we'll try to take this out. I'm going to set it as a target. Looks like it's already dead. Okay, alright, let's come over here to this guy. I've got my missiles targeted. I've got the enemy targeted here, so I should be in range of that salamander MRMs, which you can see down here. They're in range. I'm going to try to take out his engines. And he's down. Alright. We need to do something about this guy now, so I'm going to set a strike order here. I'm also going to check and see if I've lost anything. It doesn't look like I've lost any ships yet. Yet being the operative word. So now we've got a strike order on here. Let's get back in the action. I'm out of missiles, so all I've got to work with now is my heavy blaster. Now, the good thing is that my fighters all have elite crews, and that makes a pretty significant difference. So they tend to be much more effective than fighters with veteran or regular or even green crews. So it seems we dealt with that pretty handily. We're going to set a strike order here on that eco class cruiser and see if we can manage to do any damage to it. Taking some damage, and I forgot to have my shields up. Not too smart. I'm going to just kind of plink at it a little bit here with my heavy blaster. My flux is getting kind of high, so I don't have a lot of firepower at my disposal. Go ahead and back off a little bit and vent my flux. And real quick here, let me take a look and see if I lost my... I didn't lose my bomber wing, so that's good. It's kind of hard to see what's going on here. What I wanted to do was check and see if there was any fighter wings that were down a few ships, and then I was going to manually send them back to the carrier, but I can't really see what's going on, so whatever. I'll just keep plugging away here. Alright, so now I've got my point defense lasers and my heavy blaster going to town on the back of the ship here. I'm going to kind of strafe a little bit to try to stay behind it. And it looks like we're going to be able to wear this guy down in pretty short order here. Looks like my flux is getting pretty close to capping out, so I'm going to vent it, but that thing's probably going to go down in a minute. And there it goes. And it looks like that tanker is probably turning tail and running, but I'm just going to go ahead and send an assault order over here on this buoy. Oh, game over. So, what do we lose? Nothing. And it looks like we got a Wolf-class assault frigate, albeit damaged, out of this. So I'll go ahead and board that. Lost 2 Marines during the successful boarding action. I'm actually paying attention to this message down here. And we've got a little bit of stuff. We'll go ahead and take all of that. And there you go. So, all in all, things turned out better than expected. I was thinking that that assault cruiser was going to present a bigger threat than it did, but because I'm a cheating bastard and gave myself a lot of money and I used that money to purchase elite crews, I got the edge. Alright, so that's going to be it for now. Highly recommend you check out this mod, if only for the novelty of having some extra stations and new ships to mess around with. I'm going to be hopefully taking a look at some other mods. The next ones that I want to look at are In the Orbit of God, and probably project the Ironclads project, and then possibly the Star Wars mod. I'm not super fired up about that one, but it looks like the guys put a lot of work into it, so I figure I might as well give it a chance. Alright, so until next time, have a good one.